Early one Tuesday morning, an HOA president named Bethany Kensington Wright made a $2.3 million mistake that would ultimately send her to federal prison for 8 years. And it all began with the sound of bolt cutters snapping through the wrong chain on the wrong vehicle. That sharp metallic crack shattered the calm of Willowbrook Estates like a gunshot. In that instant, Bethany crossed the line from suburban HOA enforcer to federal criminal. What she believed was just another eyesore truck in her neighborhood was, in reality, a government-issued Jeep filled with over $300,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment. While I was overseas battling cartel operations, Bethany, drunk on power from her role as HOA president, decided my vehicle didn't belong in her perfect little suburb. What she didn't realize was that the Jeep belonged to a federal drug task force. And I'm not just some soldier, I'm a federal agent trained to dismantle criminal networks. She thought she was flexing her authority over a neighborhood nuisance. In reality, she had just committed felonies so serious that drug lords would envy them. What would you do if someone back home tried to strip away your rights and property while you were serving your country? My name is Marcus Tank Rodriguez, and 3 months ago I thought inheriting my grandmother's home would be a blessing. Instead, it became a battleground. Willowbrook Estates looked picture-perfect on the surface: identical beige houses, manicured lawns, sprinklers on schedule, mulch beds lining every walkway. But beneath that polished surface lurked entitlement and control, wrapped in $150 a month of HOA dues. Translation: money to fund the rule of a suburban tyrant. I'm an Army Reserve MP, recently brought onto a federal drug enforcement task force. My grandmother Rose's home was supposed to be my foundation, as somewhere I could rent out during deployments, build stability, and honor the woman who raised me after my parents' accident. That house still carries her scent, the warmth of her cooking, the lesson she instilled in me: Mayo, you stand up to bullies, but you do it the right way. And then there was Bethany Kensington Wright, 52 years old. A real estate agent with a spotless white Lexus and a ruler for measuring grass height. 7 years as HOA president had made her into the self-proclaimed Queen of Willowbrook. With her husband Carl sitting comfortably on city council, she strutted around untouchably, issuing violation notices for Christmas lights left up in January or any other petty offense she could invent. Just 2 weeks after I deployed, an email landed in my inbox. A violation notice: unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. She was targeting my government Jeep, marked with federal law enforcement decals, labeling it an eyesore. Her reasoning: HOA rules forbid work vehicles in residential driveways. But here's what she didn't know: that Jeep held over $200,000 worth of federal surveillance gear tied to active cartel cases. Encrypted radios, GPS trackers, covert cameras, all equipment that couldn't legally be moved without authorization. The fines were set at $50 a day, piling up while I was dodging bullets on the other side of the world. My younger sister Maya, a middle school teacher, tried to reason with Bethany. She showed up with my deployment papers, even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. But Bethany looked at her with cold disdain. Rules are rules, she snapped. If your brother can't follow community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't for your family. When Maya called me, her voice shook with frustration. Bethany had threatened to put a lien on the house and even suggested her husband's political influence could jeopardize Maya's job at the school district. That's when Maya discovered a pattern. Military families were being singled out. The Johnsons say he was a Maroney cited for a loud motorcycle. Sarah Martinez, a Navy wife with a deployed husband, fined for having garden gnomes. Every military household was being harassed. The worst part? Bethany's rules weren't even real. Digging through our grandmother's original HOA documents from 1987, Maya found a clause exempting government vehicles, military, law enforcement, and emergency from those restrictions. Bethany had fabricated violations and banked on residents being too intimidated to fight back. The neighborhood was living in fear. People whispered complaints over backyard fences but never dared to oppose her openly. With Carl's political reach, Bethany seemed untouchable. That's when I realized what this truly was: not about property values or parking, but organized harassment of military families under the shield of HOA authority. I remembered my grandmother's words echoing in my head: stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. While I was risking my life to keep drugs off America's streets, Bethany Kensington Wright was trying to strip away my family's home with forged violations and intimidation tactics. She thought she was just bullying another military family. What she didn't know was that she had just declared war on someone who specializes in dismantling criminal organizations. And her little hoe empire was about to be my next takedown. Her retaliation came fast. Just 48 hours later, Maya received a certified letter demanding the Jeep be removed within 24 hours or it would be towed immediately. Not 48, not 72, 24. The letter claimed health and safety violations and emergency neighborhood degradation, all dressed up in legal jargon and copied to Carl's city council office and the local police. It was pure fiction, weaponized paperwork. That's when Maya called me, panic in her voice. I was on a sat phone, listening to the familiar creak of my grandmother's old kitchen floorboards as Maya spoke, her panic bleeding through every word. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver keeps eyeing your Jeep like he's getting ready to hook it up." The sweet scent of Grandma's vanilla candles couldn't cover the fear in Maya's voice. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore, this was psychological warfare, dressed up in hoe authority. That's when I threw my first real counterpunch. I called in Jaga, the Judge Advocate General's Corps. If you don't know, they're military lawyers who chew up constitutional violations for breakfast. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams reviewed my file, and the shift in her face said everything. Professional curiosity turned to righteous fury. "Rodriguez, this woman is threatening to seize federal law enforcement property. That's not an hoe dispute. That's a federal crime. Most people don't realize this. The Service Member Civil Relief Act doesn't just protect deployed troops from shady contract clauses, it specifically guards their property against harassment. And my Jeep wasn't just my ride, it was federal equipment belonging to the United States government." Williams immediately filed a formal complaint with Base Command. That triggered something beautiful, a military liaison review. Suddenly, Bethany's little power trip wasn't just neighborhood buzziness, it was on the radar of people with real authority. But the deeper Maya dug into Grandma's hoe files, the more twisted this story became. Hidden in a stack of meeting notes from 2019, she found a bombshell. A letter Bethany had written to the City Planning Commission. It argued against military housing support in Willowbrook, claiming transient military populations don't maintain long-term community standards. Translation: she didn't want military families in her neighborhood ever. Maya's voice shook when she called me with the discovery. "Tank, she's been targeting us all along. Every military family here. The Hendersons decided because their son's bike was left out. The Washingtons slapped with a noise violation because their newborn cried at night. This wasn't random power abuse. This was systematic discrimination, backed by her husband's political reach." And Carl's angle became clear. He had a luxury condo project waiting on zoning approval, military families with their deployments, work vehicles, and unpredictable schedules didn't fit the glossy exclusive community image. Maya's instincts as a teacher turned her into an organizer. She started contacting other families, collecting letters, violations, threats, building a paper trail that, piece by piece, formed the outline of a federal discrimination case. But Bethany wasn't done. One afternoon, Maya called me again. I could hear the sharp clack of expensive heels echoing on the driveway through the phone. Bethany herself was on our property, clipboard in hand, snapping pictures of my Jeep, measuring with a tape, documenting every inch like she was building a case for trial. With her smug voice she told Maya, "Your brother's military service doesn't excuse him from community compliance. Maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for your family's lifestyle." That wasn't about rules. That was code for "we don't want your cunt here." That's when I went on offense. Using remote access to my Jeep's built-in task force systems, I activated the GPS and surveillance logs. What came back was gold. Bethany had trespassed onto my property 17 times in just 3 days, photographing federal equipment without clearance. That wasn't petty harassment anymore. That was possible espionage. When my task force commander, Captain Sarah Chen, heard about it, she didn't mince words. "Rodriguez, How fast do you want me to make this woman's life difficult? Bethany had officially moved from neighborhood tyrant to a federal problem. But she wasn't ready to fold. Her next move was desperate, a classic show of suburban authority. Just 3 days after my JAG complaint, she hired a private security firm, ExecSafe, to patrol for community standards compliance. 2 guards in a white SUV, circling Grandma's house, snapping photos of my Jeep every hour like it was a bomb on wheels. That alone was intimidation, but worse was what they were spreading around the neighborhood. Ma's voice broke as she relayed it to me. "Tank, they're telling people you're dangerous, that military vehicles are a security risk." Neighbors she'd known for years suddenly avoided her. Mrs. Patterson wouldn't even look at her at the mailbox. Hearing my sister cry while I stood halfway around the world, wind and sand whipping through my outpost, lit something cold in me. They weren't just harassing us anymore. Yeah, they were dismantling my family's reputation. I knew then my next strike couldn't just be retaliation. It had to be surgical, precise, and even from 8,000 miles away, with only slivers of time to communicate, I was ready to deliver it. During my next authorized call window, I explained to Captain Chen that private security was actively monitoring a federal task force vehicle. Her reply wasn't what I expected. "Rodriguez, this is delicate. If we hit back too hard, it'll make their narrative about your Jeep being dangerous look legitimate. We need them to dig their own grave." That's when I tapped into the Jeep's built-in security suite. Federal task force rigs carry more surveillance gear than most small police departments. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, GPS logs, and automatic snapshots of anyone who gets within 15 feet. The footage made my stomach twist. Bethany wasn't just taking notes on violations. At 1:43 in the morning, there she was, shining a flashlight into my Jeep, snapping pictures of the dashboard, and even tugging on the door handles. She was trying to access classified government tech. And she wasn't alone. The video showed her pointing out equipment to the private security guards while they documented every detail. That wasn't petty-ho business anymore. That was federal espionage. Meanwhile, Maya was bearing the brunt of it. Parents at her school started whispering, questioning whether a teacher from a military family with security problems should be around their children. Her principal called her in to discuss community concerns. I could hear the sawdust exhaustion in her voice when she phoned me. "Tank, a broken bar." Bethany told the PTA that military families bring instability and risks to neighborhoods. "She's using my job against me." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a vehicle or even the house. They were dismantling my family's life, piece by piece, while I sat powerless on the other side of the world. The taste of helplessness is sand and rage. Sitting in a bunker surrounded by war machines while some self-appointed suburban dictator tears apart your sister's world. And Bethany's thugs escalated. One of ExecSafe's guards, a washed-out wannabe cop with a chip on his shoulder, cornered Maya in a grocery store parking lot. "Ma'am, we need to talk about your brother's military activities," he said, blocking her from reaching her car. "That vehicle contains equipment that might endanger community safety. We need to know what kind of operations he's running from your house." Bless Maya's instincts as she hit record on her phone. "Are you saying my brother, who's overseas defending this country, is a threat to American families?" she asked, steady voice hiding the tremor beneath it. The guard leaned in closer, trying to rattle her. "Military personnel sometimes bring problems home. PTSD, weapons, surveillance gear. We're just making sure the community is safe." Translation: they were branding me as an unstable, dangerous veteran. Discrimination, sugar-coated as public safety. But Maya's recording caught the golden moment. The guard admitted they were investigating my Jeep's surveillance equipment. That wasn't just intimidation, it was evidence of espionage. That clip gave me my next counterpunch. Captain Chen immediately contacted ExecSafe's Federal Licensing Bureau, filing a complaint that their guards had conducted unauthorized surveillance of classified government property. Within hours, the guards disappeared from Willowbrook. ExecSafe itself was suddenly staring down a federal investigation. Bethany panicked. Losing her hired muscle sent her spiraling. She started carpet bombing agencies with complaints of police, fire, code enforcement, even animal control. All it really did was build a paper trail that screamed obsession with federal property. But while I was still trapped overseas, my family was left taking hits. The war had officially escalated. Bethany's breaking point came one Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. And Ma's security cameras caught every second of it. I'll never forget the sound. Clang, clang, clang of bolt cutters biting through my security chains. Each metallic snap rang out in the dawn silence like a gunshot. Ma's frantic call jolted me awake in my tent. Tank, she's cutting your locks. She's got bolt cutters and a tow truck. She's stealing your Jeep right now. Through her phone camera, I watched Bethany Kensington Wright commit felony after felony in real time. Her hair was a mess, bathrobe flapping, barking frantic orders at a tow truck crew she'd clearly paid in cash. She wanted them to haul away a Jeep plastered with federal law enforcement decals. The driver froze. He looked at the markings, then started backing off like he'd touched a live wire. "Lady, this is government property. I'm not touching it for any amount of money. It's abandoned property," Bethany screamed back, voice cracking, spit flying as her suburban empire began collapsing in real time. Bethany's shrill voice cut through the morning air as she waved bolt cutters like a trophy. "I am the HOA president. I have the legal authority to remove community violations." Unfortunately for her, 3 separate security cameras caught this statement crystal clear. Exhibit A in a federal theft case. I didn't waste a second. Using emergency channels, I contacted Captain Chen. The moment she logged my report, it triggered federal theft of property protocols. Within minutes, U.S. Marshals were en route to my grandmother's address, sirens blazing. But here's where the twist came in. My Jeep wasn't just any vehicle. Hidden GPS trackers, kill switches, and motion-activated cameras were already documenting the theft in real time. The second Bethany snapped my locks, she set off a Homeland Security alert that pinged systems across 3 states, and Ma caught the rest on her phone. After the tow truck driver bolted, leaving skid marks down the street in his hurry to escape, Bethany made her fatal mistake. She swapped out the locks on the community gate, trapping a federal vehicle inside Willowbrook and blocking government agents from reaching it. If he wants his precious military truck back, he can follow proper HOA procedures. She shrieked, waving the new keys like a lunatic queen of suburbia. Military service doesn't make him above community standards. I sat thousands of miles away, helpless, as rage coiled inside me, watching my sister record this suburban tyrant meltdown while she held federal property hostage felt like acid in my veins. Knowledge nugget: federal task force vehicles are wired with automatic alerts. Any tampering triggers GPS tracking, Homeland Security pings, and federal response teams. This isn't just theft, it's treated as a potential terrorism case. And Bethany had just checked every box. Her downfall began not with law enforcement, but with neighbors. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who'd buried 2 military sons, witnessed the entire scene from her front window. She wasn't about to let an HOA tyrant terrorize another military family. She picked up the phone and rallied every veteran and decent neighbor in Willowbrook. By mid-morning, my grandmother's house was surrounded, not by marshals but by neighbors forming a protective human shield around the Jeep. Tom Henderson, a 72-year-old Vietnam vet, stood tall at the front. "You want that boy's vehicle?" he said, voice steady as granite. "You'll go through 30 American veterans first." When Ma called me back, her voice was stronger this time. "Tank, you should see this. The whole neighborhood's here." Mr. Henderson brought his flag. "Mrs. Chen's serving coffee. They're not leaving." For the first time, my chest ached with gratitude instead of helplessness. Willowbrook was finally fighting back. Bethany, of course, doubled down. She started flooding government agencies with bogus emergency complaints. Police dispatchers heard her claim that veterans were forming an armed militia. The fire department got false reports about explosive hazards. Code enforcement received fabricated violations about illegal assemblies. Even animal control was dragged in as she claimed emotional support dogs were attack animals. Every call she made was another federal crime. Filing false statements about military families and federal property carries heavy penalties, and she had just handed law enforcement an entire stack of them. The breaking point came when federal marshals finally arrived at Willowbrook and found the gate locked with Bethany's new hardware. She had literally imprisoned government property and obstructed federal agents. Marshal Jennifer Torresa, a veteran agent who'd put cartel bosses and domestic terrorists in cuffs, took one look at that locked gate. Her eyes went flat and cold. "Ma'am," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "you have obstructed federal agents investigating theft of government property. Unlock this gate immediately, or face additional charges." Bethany's answer sealed her fate. "I don't recognize federal authority over private HOA property. You have no jurisdiction here." She had just declared war on the United States government while standing in her bathrobe. Game over. 72 hours later, I was wheels down stateside, adrenaline still buzzing in my blood. The first thing that hit me when I walked into Grandma's kitchen wasn't the smell of her vanilla candles or the tortillas she used to make. It was fear. Desperation had seeped into those walls in my absence. "Tank, you need to see this before the feds get here," Ma said, her hands trembling as she spread stacks of papers across the dining table. The discovery hit me like a freight train. Inside the manila folders were 5 years' worth of HOA records of financial statements, meeting notes, and correspondencia that Ma had tracked down through what she casually called her teacher network. But buried within that mountain of paperwork was a single document that froze my blood, a contract signed between Kensington Urban Holdings and Eastbrook Development Corporation, dated 6 months before Grandma's house ever passed into my name. Across the top, in bold, were the words, "Willowbrook Estates Acquisition Strategy. Phase 2 Implementation." They weren't targeting military families by accident, Ma whispered, her voice carrying the weight of revelation. She'd shifted from nervous teacher to relentless investigator. This was a calculated purge designed to clear out properties for a massive development deal. The paper was brittle between my fingers, its age evident, but the details cut sharper than glass. Carl's company had already pre-sold 47 homes in Willowbrook to a luxury developer, homes they didn't even legally own yet, including Grandma's. "Check the target list," Ma said, stabbing her finger at the appendix. My stomach tightened as I scanned the names. Every vulnerable household, every veteran, every elderly resident of the Hendersons, the Martinez family, even Grandma Rosa, each one singled out for acquisition facilitation. It wasn't harassment, it was a campaign of displacement. But the hammer really fell when Ma flipped to the original 1987 HOA bylaws, the genuine ones Bethany had buried. My pulse spiked as I read. Military vehicles weren't prohibited, they were explicitly protected under federal compliance laws. She faked the rules. "Tank," Ma said, her voice firmer now, steel sharpening through fear. She counted on people being too scared or too uninformed to push back, and there was more. The financial audits revealed a darker truth: over $184,000 siphoned away during the last 3 years. Community funds funneled straight into Carl's company through bogus consulting fees and improvement projects that never existed. Knowledge point: when HOA boards reroute community funds into personal businesses without approval, it escalates into federal mail fraud if interstate communications are involved. Combine that with systematic targeting, and you've crossed into RICO territory, organized crime with penalties stretching up to 20 years. Ma's determination burned through her trembling hands as she revealed the final piece. "Tank, a broken bar. I think they killed her." She slid violation notices across the table, all issued during Grandma's last weeks in hospice. Fines for yard maintenance and threats of lawsuits against a dying woman who couldn't even leave her bed. The nurse had said her blood pressure spiked each time another notice arrived. I could still hear Grandma's voice. "Mayo, don't let them take our home." At the time, I thought it was morphine confusion. Now I know it was a warning. Ma wasn't the timid teacher anymore. She had become a force, a soldier in her own right, wielding evidence like a weapon. "This isn't about your Jeep anymore," she said, eyes locked on mine. "This is organized crime wearing the mask of neighborhood governance. They're tearing families apart for profit." The fight had escalated from personal property to something far greater: my grandmother's legacy, and the dignity of every family destroyed under Bethany's regime. Within 48 hours, Grandma's living room had transformed into our war room. The irony wasn't lost on me. We were planning the dismantling of suburban tyranny in the same space where she once shouted at telenovelists. The vanilla candle scent had been replaced by burnt coffee, sweat, and the rustle of legal documents. Captain Chen arrived flanked by 2 federal prosecutors, armed with the kind of legal arsenal used to dismantle crime syndicates. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez spread Ma's collected evidence across the table, shaking her head in disbelief. "Rodriguez," she said, "I've prosecuted cartel money laundering rings with less evidence than this." That's when the lessons from my federal crimes course came flooding back. RICO wasn't just some abstract statute. It was built for this. RICO laws were built to take down mobsters and drug lords. But now, it turned out that when suburban tyrants engaged in systematic fraud, harassment, and interstate schemes, they stepped squarely into the same category: federal organized crime. Ma's evidence mapped out a full-scale criminal enterprise: embezzlement, fraud, civil rights violations, all coordinated between Carl's city council power and Bethany's HOA control. With Carl's development contracts crossing state lines, jurisdiction shifted firmly into federal territory. The gathering in Grandma's living room had the feel of a resistance cell. Tom Henderson rallied his Vietnam vet buddies, 12 men who had survived real battlefields and weren't about to be cowed by cul-de-sac corruption. Mrs. Patterson came armed with surveillance photos of Carl and Bethany holding clandestine meetings at the community center long after midnight. From Ma's teacher union came an unexpected strength: media strategy. Teachers knew how to break down complex issues for ordinary families, and they were ready to shine a spotlight on discrimination against military households. In those same rooms where Grandma once sang lullabies, Ma's voice now rang out with clarity and command as she coordinated volunteers and federal agents alike. Watching my younger sister take charge loosened something in my chest. She wasn't just surviving this fight anymore, she was leading it. Her personal fire came from the financial crimes. Nights spent sifting through HOA records had revealed patterns only a teacher's eye would catch, like spotting the same student cheating across multiple assignments. To her, the $184,000 stolen through sham consulting and fake community projects wasn't just theft, it was the betrayal of families. "Tank, remember how Mom used to balance the family budget on this very table?" she asked, pointing to a spreadsheet assembled by forensic accountant Jennifer Walsh. "She taught us stealing from families is the worst kind of crime." Walsh broke down Carl's scheme with brutal clarity: selling homes to out-of-state developers before strong-arming current owners to vacate. I recognized it instantly from my own federal crimes training, an advanced fee fraud model, just applied to real estate. And Ma had emails to prove it. Messages between Carl and Eastbrook Development detailed displacement timelines for homes they didn't even own yet. The sting of it was personal. Grandma's house had been marked for theft before she even passed away. Our defense grew into a neighborhood intelligence network. With my military training and the community's determination, we set up hidden cameras, rotating patrols, and encrypted communications. Mrs. Patterson's living room window became a lookout post. Henderson's garage was converted into an equipment depot. Ma's place ran the communications hub. Her civics teacher instincts gave us a legal strategy too. A recall election. She'd always told her students democracy only works if people participate, and now she was proving it. Few residents knew HOA boards could be removed with petitions signed by just 33% of homeowners. Within 72 hours, Ma had collected signatures from 67% of Willowbrook residents, a far more than enough. Every door she knocked on revealed new wounds. The Washingtons had records of racial harassment. The Johnsons had endured blatant veteran discrimination. The elderly Kowalskis were fined for noise violations caused by their oxygen machine. Bethany's tyranny was no longer rumor, it was documented fact. Momentum snowballed. Military family harassment stories spread online, going viral in veteran communities and drawing congressional interest. 3 representatives demanded federal briefings on HOA discrimination. Then came another bombshell. Ma uncovered fraudulent insurance claims Bethany had filed for damage caused by Tank's Jeep, a damage that had never existed. From my task force experience, I knew insurance fraud was a federal prosecutor's dream charge, easy to prove, devastating in penalties. Civil rights attorneys also stepped in, confirming that targeting veterans violated federal housing laws, and the abuse of Grandma in her final days fell under elder protection statutes worth millions in damages. Ma Yu's rise to leadership came almost naturally. At an emergency residence meeting, she was voted interim HOA president by acclamation. Her first act was swift and decisive via freezing all HOA account spending investigation. To see her wield the gavel in the same community center where Bethany had tormented families for years, it was justice, sharp and cold. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was becoming a model for the nation, proof that organized communities could rise up against organized crime. But Bethany and Carl were unraveling. Desperation drove Bethany into reckless choices. At 3:17 a.m., Mia's infrared cameras caught her sneaking into our backyard, frantically burning stacks of HOA financial records behind Grandma's shed. The acrid stench of scorched paper and lighter fluid drifted straight into Ma Yu's bedroom window. Mixing with the night air, the stench of fear clung to Bethany like a second skin. From Ma Yu's window, we watched her hunched over a rusted trash can, feeding papers into the fire with trembling hands. She looked like some desperate suburban witch, striking match after match, smoke curling around her as she tried to erase the evidence of her crimes. "Tank a broken bar, she's in our backyard burning records," Ma Yu whispered into her phone, her voice low but tight with disbelief. "She's literally destroying documents while under federal investigation." Weeks of preparation had led to this moment. Federal surveillance teams were already monitoring her every reckless move, logging each frantic attempt to cover her tracks. But watching Bethany personally torch the very proof of her corruption, it was darkly poetic. Her sabotage didn't stop at shredding paperwork. Soon it turned personal. The next morning, Ma Yu's car sat mutilated in the driveway, every tire slashed, and across the windshield, in dripping red spray paint, military scum. The crunch of broken glass under Ma Yu's shoes as she circled the wreck twisted something cold and calculating inside me. The helpless rage was the same I'd felt on deployment, watching enemies strike at those you couldn't shield. But this wasn't a war zone over Cesar, this was domestic terrorism in our own neighborhood. I made the call that shifted the battlefield. Captain Chen arranged federal protective detail for Ma Yu and the other targeted families. These weren't bulky guards in black suits, they were agents who blended seamlessly into joggers, baristas, and neighbors walking their dogs. Now Bethany's spies were being watched by professionals with federal authority and arrest powers. The community rallied with military precision. Tom Henderson organized rotating veteran patrols, their combat boots echoing across the streets at 2 in the morning, an unspoken promise that Bethany's late-night harassment was finished. Mrs. Patterson's kitchen turned into our command post, protection schedules planned out over coffee and homemade cookies. Carl's desperation pulled him into even deeper waters. Ma Yu uncovered city council recordings of him leaning on the police chief to ignore complaints from military families. His smug voice played back on her laptop, dripping with arrogance. "These military types bring instability. Their vehicles, their schedules, their issues, they drag down property values and community character." That recording was a gift. My federal training told me exactly what it meant: a civil rights conspiracy. When public officials twist their authority to systematically suppress citizens' rights, it isn't just corruption, it's a federal crime. Bethany, meanwhile, tried to buy her way out. Surveillance caught her cornering Ma Yu outside the grocery store, a thick envelope clutched in her manicured hand. $50,000, she hissed, pressing it forward, her perfume unable to cover the stink of desperation. "Your family deserves a better neighborhood. Take this, move somewhere broken bar more fitting." Ma Yu, ever the teacher, didn't flinch. She kept her phone recording while federal agents in unmarked cars documented every word. Attempted bribery of a witness, a 5 years minimum. No way around it. But Bethany wasn't finished digging her own grave. Through a shady private investigator paid with stolen HOA funds, she tried to bribe federal agents themselves, offering cash to make the military problem disappear. It was laughable. She thought everyone was as corrupt as her HOA kingdom. But federal agents don't take bribes. They record them, catalog them, and use them to guarantee prison sentences. Carl's allies abandoned him like rats leaving a sinking ship. The mayor distanced himself publicly. City council members demanded Carl resign. His development company's stock nosedived the moment corruption made headlines. At emergency meetings, his expensive cologne couldn't mask the reek of panic. He lashed out, accusing outside agitators of targeting local businesses, trying to spin federal investigations as attacks on community success. Every abuse of power only gave federal prosecutors more ammunition. Then came the threats. Maya found anonymous notes tucked under her windshield, voicemails warped and distorted. Accidents happen to teachers who can't stay quiet. Hearing her voice crack as she replayed those messages ignited something primal inside me. But I didn't react with ragia, I reacted with training. Threatening witnesses during a federal probe triggers the FBI's counterterrorism protocols. Every call, every scrawled note, every cowardly whisper was being dissected by handwriting experts, phone forensics, and digital tracking teams. Bethany and Carl had crossed the line from corruption into terrorism, and they had no idea the jaws of federal justice were already locked around them. The forensic trail was airtight as something that would make any TV crime lab look amateur. Bethany's next desperate strike was filing false police reports. She told officers Maya was unstable, dangerous, plotting violent retaliation against community leaders. She even claimed military families were secretly organizing armed militias inside Willowbrook. That wasn't just Aaliyah, it was federal obstruction of justice. When false reports target protected witnesses in an active case, the law adds terrorism enhancements. The beauty of federal patience was watching Bethany bury herself, one felony at a time, while methodical agents documented everything with surgical precision. Her last gamble before collapse was a full-blown character assassination in the media, exposing the true scope of her suburban empire of lies. The attack began at Maya's school. District offices were flooded with anonymous complaints accusing her of radicalizing children with anti-government propaganda and creating unsafe classrooms for civilian families. When Maya called me from her empty classroom, her voice was breaking. "Tank a broken bar, they're trying to destroy my career." I could hear the chalk dust in the air, the innocence of children's drawings on the walls, all of it poisoned by fear. Parents were demanding her termination. The principal summoned her for urgent discussions about her ties to unstable military elements. That's when we uncovered Bethany's latest weapon. Morrison Associates, a polished PR firm infamous for sanitizing politicians after corruption scandals. They were painting Maya as an unhinged veteran with PTSD, a dangerous figure bringing military-grade threats into peaceful suburbs. It wasn't enemy propaganda over Cesar, it was worse. This was domestic psychological warfare, precision targeted to destroy families, reputations, and livelihoods. But Bethany had underestimated Maya. Months of documenting every threat, every slander, had sharpened her into a one-woman intelligence unit. And then the bigger picture snapped into focus. Bethany wasn't acting alone. Through the investigation, we discovered she'd built networks with HOA boards across 3 states, pushing model policies to manage so-called military disruptions. This wasn't harassment anymore, it was systemic discrimination, exported like a product. From my task force training, I knew exactly what that meant: a interstate conspiracy, a RICO case, organized crime wearing pearls and sipping lattes. Maya's counterstrike was devastatingly simple. Her students and their parents staged a support rally. The school parking lot overflowed with American flags and handmade signs. "We support Teacher Maya. Military families protect our freedom." The sound of 3rd graders chanting "Thank you, Mr. Tank's sister," carried across the playground where Maya had nurtured young minds for years. The children understood justice better than the adults weaponizing lies. Bethany escalated again, crossing into criminal insanity. She hired private investigators to stalk Maya, tailing her commute, photographing her in grocery aisles, clicking telephoto lenses outside her classroom windows. During a routine safety inspection, Maya discovered 3 separate listening devices hidden in her car. Federal purchase records traced every single one back to Morrison Associates. Federal law is crystal clear about unauthorized surveillance. Planting listening devices doesn't just violate the Wiretap Act, it carries up to 20 years in prison. especially when it involves witness intimidation. But tampering with a teacher's car, embedding spy tech against a federal witness that kicked the case into Homeland Security's jurisdiction. Captain Chen wasted no time. The FBI's counterintelligence division took control, classifying Ma Yu's harassment as potential domestic terrorism. What Bethany thought was neighborhood bullying was now under the scrutiny of the same agents who hunt foreign espionage cells. The story exploded nationwide. Military advocacy groups amplified Ma Yu's ordeal. Congressional offices demanded hearings on systematic HOA discrimination against service families. National media descend of Fox News, CNN, Military Times. Carl's political career collapsed live on air. During a city council meeting, federal agents marched in with search warrants, pulling out boxes of evidence while cameras rolled. Carl sat paralyzed in his chair, the smug confidence gone, replaced with the gray face of a man watching his empire crumble. But Morrison Associates made the fatal misstep that brought federal hate crime charges. They published a community safety report claiming military families caused higher crime rates, domestic violence, and substance abuse in suburbs. Fabricated statistics, manufactured poison. And now, the very weapon Bethany paid for had triggered the most powerful federal statutes available. The so-called Community Safety Report was nothing but falsified crime data crafted to spread fear and incite discrimination against military families. As Ma Yu read it, I saw her teacher's calm resolve ignite into righteous fury. "Tank, they didn't just attack me," she said, her voice trembling with conviction. "They just targeted every military family in America with lies meant to push us out of our own neighborhoods." Publishing deliberate misinformation to stir hatred against protected groups isn't just unethical, it's a federal hate crime. When it's done across multiple states for financial gain, it escalates to racketeering and civil rights conspiracy. That single report turned a local smear campaign into a multi-state federal investigation. Within weeks, cases were opened in 17 states as military families surfaced with stories that echoed Ma Yu's fabricated violations, coordinated harassment, systemic efforts to exile them from suburban communities. Ma Yu's meticulous records became the blueprint federal prosecutors used to construct RICO cases against corrupt HOA networks. Her inbox overflowed with messages from military spouses nationwide, each one sharing their own battles against harassment and discrimination. And somewhere along the way, my little sister transformed. No longer the panicked teacher begging for help, she became a steady voice of leadership, her confidence filling the same living room where our grandmother once told us stories about standing up to bullies. Ma Yu was no longer a victim, she was a national advocate. "They thought they were fighting one teacher and one soldier," she said one night, surrounded by towers of federal case files. "But what they really did was declare war on every American family that serves this country." The reckoning wasn't just coming, it was federally spectacular. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never seen anything like it. The room overflowed beyond fire code. Federal agents lined the walls, television crews from 6 networks set up cameras, and military families from across 3 states packed into folding chairs, some standing in the back, refusing to miss history in the making. The air buzzed with tension, a mix of stale coffee, righteous anger, and the quiet authority of law enforcement preparing to act. Even Congress had shown up. Representatives filled the front rows, penned scratching notes for upcoming hearings on military family discrimination. Bethany chose her usual dramatic entrance, arriving late in her white Lexus. But instead of admiration, she was greeted by a gauntlet of protesters wielding signs, "Military families matter" and "Prosecute HOA terrorists." Veterans lined the path, their chant a "Thank you for your service" aimed at Ma Yu, not her. Bethany entered the building like a fallen tyrant dragged to her last stand, Carl trailing behind with the defeated shuffle of a man who already smelled the inside of federal prison. The panic radiating from them was visible, almost tangible, as they faced the very families they had terrorized. Then Ma Yu took the podium. She was no longer the trembling teacher fighting for survival. She stood tall, carrying the weight of federal backing and congressional recognition. For 5 years, these people used their positions to wage war on military families, she began, her voice echoing through speakers and across live social media streams. They fabricated rules, embezzled funds, and orchestrated discrimination campaigns that violated everything this country claims to stand for. The room erupted, thunderous applause rattling the windows. Federal prosecutor Rebecca Martinez stepped forward, her presence commanding absolute silence. Behind her stood boxes of evidence, months of investigative work distilled into hard proof. The United States government has compiled overwhelming evidence of criminal conspiracy, she declared, her words like hammer strikes: federal property theft, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. The list goes on. Their amateur hour is finished. Next came Tom Henderson, a Vietnam veteran speaking for every military family present, his weathered voice cracked with emotion. My son served 3 tours to protect this country's freedom. These people thought they could spit on that sacrifice for their own profit. Today, they learned they were wrong. But the defining moment belonged to me. I stepped up to the microphone, feeling our grandmother's spirit steadying my heart. Stand up to bullies, Mayo. But do it the right way. Her voice whispered in memory. And this was the right way. I let my words slice the silence. Bethany Kensington Wright thought she was cutting locks on a soldier's personal vehicle. What she actually did was interfere with an active federal drug operation, compromise classified surveillance, and steal property belonging to the United States government. The collective gasp that swept through the room was deafening, as if the air itself had been sucked away. That Jeep contained $347,000 worth of surveillance equipment tied to cartel investigations spanning 4 states, I continued, each word deliberate. By cutting those locks, she didn't just commit theft, she compromised national security operations that keep drugs off American streets and protect American families. Bethany's face drained of color, her suburban mask finally stripped away. Bethany's face drained to the color of weathered stone as the enormity of her crimes finally hit her. She hadn't just bullied neighbors, she'd stepped directly into the realm of national security. But theft of my vehicle wasn't her greatest crime, I said, my voice level and cutting. Her real offense was orchestrating a campaign of systematic warfare against military families. She twisted community power, stole from the very people she was meant to serve, and acted like suburban privilege stood above federal law. The room erupted. Applause and shouts of "lock her up" mingled with chants of "justice for our heroes." Federal agents began moving in, and the air thickened with anticipation. U.S. Marshal Jennifer Torres approached with the calm authority of someone who'd cuffed hundreds who thought they were untouchable. Her voice was steel. "Bethany Kensington Wright, you are under arrest for theft of federal law enforcement property, conspiracy to violate civil rights, embezzlement of community funds, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice." The sharp click of the handcuffs echoed through the speakers, captured live by every news camera. In that moment, suburban tyranny collided with federal justice. Bethany's defiance collapsed into the wide-eyed recognition that her kingdom of rules and threats couldn't shield her from a prison cell. Carl tried to slip out the back, but agents were waiting. His arrest was quiet, almost pathetic, the end of a man who built his power on intimidation only to fold when accountability arrived. For the first time, the community understood. Government vehicles aren't just steel and tires, they're classified assets, protected under laws with teeth. Interfering with them isn't vandalism, it's a federal crime with mandatory years behind bars. Maya's interview became national headline material. Her transformation from a teacher targeted in her classroom to a national advocate for military families was undeniable. This proves harassment of service families isn't some neighborhood dispute, it's a federal crime, she told reporters. No matter how corrupt, is above the Constitution. The victory tasted sweeter than every memory of Grandma's kitchen. It wasn't vengeance, it was justice, done the right way. 18 months later, I was back in that kitchen, reading the sentencing report. I could almost hear Grandma's voice. Justice served the right way, Mayo. Bethany received 8 years in federal prison, no parole, plus $647,000 in restitution. The judge's words became a precedent-setting line in legal circles. Your harassment of military families constitutes domestic terrorism disguised as community governance. This court will not tolerate suburban tyranny. Carl got 6 years and a lifetime ban from holding public office. His empire crumbled, forced to pay $3.2 million in settlements. Every family they terrorized received compensation. But the greater victory wasn't the sentences, it was the transformation of our community. Willowbrook shed its fear and reclaimed its identity. Maya, now president of the HOA, rewrote the rules into the Willowbrook Military Family Bill of Rights, a national model. Where Bethany's house once stood, now there's Veterans Memorial Park. What was once a fortress of corruption is now a playground, where children's laughter replaces the shrill voice of tyranny. Maya stepped fully into her calling. She left teaching to found the Rodriguez Foundation for Military Family Rights, using our case as the blueprint to help families nationwide. Her meticulous documentation became required study at FBI academies. Grandma's house turned into Command Central, no longer just a kitchen, but a war room where constitutional lawyers, congressional staffers, and military families strategize against corruption. The ripple effect was enormous. Congress passed legislation mandating HOA transparency and protecting service families from systemic harassment. The Tank Rodriguez Act established federal oversight of community governance, criminalizing discrimination against veterans. Knowledge born of pain became a gift to every American family. For the first time, military service members and their loved ones had federal law explicitly on their side. Federal protections now stand above any local ordinance. With just 25% of homeowner signatures, residents can recall corrupt HOA boards. Under federal law, systematic harassment is treated as organized crime, punishable by decades in prison. The lesson was clear: military families have rights no neighborhood board can strip away, and communities have the power to dismantle corruption when they act together. Our case sparked something bigger. The National HOA Corruption Database recorded more than 400 similar cases after our story went viral, launching federal investigations that shielded thousands of military families from harassment. Willowbrook thrived in the aftermath. Property values jumped 31% once the corruption was removed, proof that justice strengthens communities. Ethical governance didn't just restore peace, it drew in new families who wanted to be part of a neighborhood that stood for something. Military households, in particular, now sought out Willowbrook, knowing they'd be honored, not targeted. Maya's rise as a national advocate brought her a happiness she hadn't expected. She married David Chen, a Navy veteran and brother of Captain Sarah Chen, who'd moved to Willowbrook because our story proved military families could triumph over abuse. Their wedding reception was held in the same community center where we once watched justice delivered live. My own joy came with Elena Martinez, the federal prosecutor who had been instrumental in building our case. She eventually transferred to local operations, and together we bought the house right next door to Grandma's. Waking up every morning in the neighborhood we defended feels like a daily reminder that victory can be lived, not just remembered. The settlements from the lawsuits gave birth to the Rodriguez Military Scholarship Fund, which has already sent 23 children of service members to college. Each graduation reminds us that one family's courage can ripple into opportunities for generations to come. Mrs. Patterson, now 91 and still sharp as ever, remains the neighborhood's moral compass. She cuts the ribbon at every community event, always reminding me with a smile, "Your grandmother knew you'd do something special. She just didn't know you'd save the whole neighborhood." But the moment that truly made everything worthwhile was the first Freedom Day celebration. Hundreds of military families gathered in the park that once symbolized Bethany's reign of fear, now reclaimed for joy. Children laughed, veterans shared their pride, and the smell of barbecue filled the air that once carried bitterness. Standing hand in hand with Maya, I saw families living safely in the community Grandma loved. Still, my favorite moment is much simpler. Each morning, I look outside and see the American flag waving over homes where military families live free of intimidation. That sight is victory made visible, justice delivered, community healed, and proof that bullies can always be defeated when good people stand together. If you faced your own home nightmare, share your story. The Rodriguez Foundation continues to provide free legal support for military families battling discrimination. And if the story of neighbors fighting back and justice prevailing inspired you, don't forget to support Anna Dramanesta. Like, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story where courage meets accountability.